continuing on with stuff that Tim had me do, Tim also liked to use weighted objects in your hands to get you moving. So what I'm doing here is I'm using just these 2 weighted balls that are just filled with sand. And one of the things he would have me do, I'm not going to do the full thing, is he would have me long step with them. So in the long stepping, basically you're stepping 1.5 times the normal step, and you're kind of transitioning, trying to focus on this transition in here. Then he would have me take weighted objects, and he would basically have me power walk, where I'm doing this kind of thing, back and forth, alternating hands, sometimes the hand and the foot moving at the same time as I'm going back and forth. And what he's doing is, with that, is basically teaching me how to kind of coordinate my arms and feet, using my arms to drive me forward. If you've ever been like on the Nordic track or those kind of things, you know, or if you've ever been skiing, you know the experience. It's basically the same thing. And it's, you know, it's a kind of a butt kicker of a workout, because he used to have me use cinder blocks, the smaller ones, not the big ones, because they were doing work at the church of North Yonkers. And he would have me go from one end of the parking lot to the other, just power walking with these things. You know, and at first, you know, when you're doing it, it's kind of like that wax on, wax off thing. You're like, what the heck's he messing with me? But then, you know, I borrow Anthony. You know, you get somebody and you have to deal with it, and all of a sudden you take that step, and all of a sudden you got like some cool kung fu power, and you realize what it is there's no magic in this motion, but what it is I've now coordinated this motion with the rest of my body, which enables me to drive forward and hit people and knock the hell out of them, because now I'm using my whole body. The other thing he liked to do was torment me with other weighted objects, where he'd have me hold like weighted objects. It's like how he had me hold my hands up, and he'd have me hold my hands up with weighted objects like this, using only enough strength in the arms to hold them in the hands. And then, you know, of course, you know, he'd go off and start smoking some cigarettes or whatever. You know, when you're doing it on your own, you can use different things. Sometimes I practice on my own in secret, you know, behind everybody else's back. You know, I'll use something just like my little kettlebell, and I'll just hold it like this. Slight bend in the knees, breathing into the belly, and I'll hold it, you know, maybe 20, 30 seconds a minute. I mean, I don't get crazy with it. But the idea is to develop these muscles in here that are actually holding the arm up for the most part, so that the rest of my arm is relatively relaxed, so that I can use the muscles in the most efficient manner possible. So something even as simple as, you know, holding up, this is like a 15-pound kettlebell. I don't even know where the heck I got this thing. And I'm holding it up, breathing. Then I start rolling the shoulders back, rolling forward, and I just do other kinds of movements just to develop the coordination and control without moving my hands all over the place, so that if I'm gonna, this ball Anthony, so if I'm gonna like touch somebody and I need to slip past them, I have enough strength and structure in here to kind of add a little force if I need it, but enough play in here because the arm is relatively relaxed to step past and do something like that. So really what Tim was all about was getting you to practice different things, to develop the muscles, to develop the attributes you wanted to develop. Another one, and I talk about this in the book, Lessons from My Masters, because at that time, you know, we only had bricks and cinder blocks. We didn't have the fancy balls back then, or kettlebells. Tim would have me hold a chair up. And I'm just telling you, this is pain. And he would take a folding chair just like this one, right? And we got this on sale. It was at Walmart, right? And you hold it up. And you hold the chair like this, with the chair out. And same thing with the kettlebell, and you just hold it. You know, and then Tim, like I say, you know, you like drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes outside, you know, because you couldn't smoke inside, you know, because of the, you know, state law, right? And you'd be like this. And I'd be sitting there, and then after, you know, like about 2 minutes of that, you know, I'm like, oh my God. And he would walk over and he'd lift it back up. And I'm thinking he's going to like help me, you know, and he'd lift it back up, and then he'd walk away again. You know, and I'd be standing, I'm like, the nerve, you know? And so then he would come over and say, okay, roll your shoulders back. And I'm like, doing. And at first you're like, and I said, no, just roll the shoulders, concentrate shoulders. And before you know it, you're just doing it. And then you think, you know, the whole time you're doing this stuff, this guy's like messing with you because he ain't got nothing better to do. And then you start moving with people, and all of a sudden, you have ability, and this is crazy how you can feel how much force I'm applying, and you have strength in places and agility that most people don't have, not because they can't have it, but because they don't practice and develop it. One of the things that Tim understood and John understood, and this is the reason why it's so hard to really glean on how John trained himself. He had a very intuitive understanding of the body. There's a guy named, I hope I pronounce his last name right, Richard Schusterman. And Schusterman talks about this thing called somatics. And it's actually not spelled that way, but that's how he pronounces it. So, what the hell do I know? And what he talks about is this perception, this internal perception and external perception we have regarding our bodies, and how that external or internal perception influences our behavior and how we feel about ourselves, but also how we feel in terms of capability. And so John was a master, we'll say, of somatics. He just had an internal understanding of the body that was second to none. And so that's why he could do things that seemingly contradicted everything. Continue, my friend. Oh no, that's my foot. He did things that seemingly, get out of here, contradicted everything that you've learned growing up about human movement. And that's because they were wrong. Most of the stuff we learned growing up, I'm just telling you, just from working with John and Tim and things they taught me, it's just wrong. One of the other things, and I want to make sure I get this in here, is Tim was also big on the wobble board, right? This is one, and as you can see, signed by the Grandmaster himself. So this is like, as you can see, it's very pristine. I don't use it that much because I want to maintain this because, it has a lot of sentimental value to me. But in any event, so when you use the wobble board, and this is one of the greatest inventions by Grandmaster Perkins, because we've all seen these kind of like balance boards, the Bosu balls, and I like that stuff. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in those things, especially the Bosu ball and some of the other devices people have come up with that help you gain balance, and they're great for rehabilitation, great. But I found nothing builds the kind of combat balance you want faster once you've done the basic exercises than getting on the wobble board. And the reason is the wobble board, and I'll put it down so you can see, when I step on this, and hopefully I don't fall off and mess my video up, the board, when you step on it, John and Tim always had me make sure I put the instep of my feet on the board. And the reason is, it prevents me from using my toes in particular, or the balls of my foot, to help with my balance. So it forces a lot of the work in here in the hip flexors and also the feet and the calf muscles to learn how to control your equilibrium. And as you can see, because my equilibrium is relatively directly over the center of the board, if I lean forward or back in any direction where my center of gravity gets out of alignment with my feet and the board, I quickly lose balance. So it trains you to learn how to control your equilibrium as you're moving, because it deliberately messes your balance up to whereas even staying on it for a minute, if you can do that without falling while you're just moving your body, is, I'm telling you, way, way more beneficial than standing there, in horse stance, for an hour. I'm not saying I'm not against horse stance. I do similar exercises to horse stance, but that's more for leg development. So when I'm moving with people, the problem is, just push please. If I resist too much, it's too easy for him to push me off the board because my balance is already compromised, which is the whole point of the board. So it teaches you, there we go, how to move your body in a way where as you feel things based on how it feels internally to your body, I can feel this feels uncomfortable, that feels comfortable. It teaches you to learn how to move your body in an efficient manner without getting too jerky, but in a smooth, coordinated manner to control your equilibrium. The other thing it does is teaches me, should I feel like I'm going to lose balance, to train myself to step off and immediately come back and recover. And the reason that is so significant is because it's not realistic to think, I'm sorry, in a real fight, thinking you're always going to be able to have perfect balance. You know, there's all kinds of stuff in the road. Uneven pavement, because we just, for whatever reason in the 21st century, don't know how to make a level sidewalk anymore. Probably never did, even though I can find, you know, roads in Afghanistan and in Italy that the Romans built, right? Go figure. So, for real, right? So, it throws my center of gravity off on purpose, and it trains me on a neurological level that should I feel like my balance is going to go, rather than fight it, which stiffens my body up, is immediately recover. Step off, recover as quickly as possible, get right back into the battle and end it. Eventually you get to the point where you learn how to feel where they are, change the vector, I know, it's crazy, of another, get out of here, of another person's movement. So I'm feeling where Anthony is, you do, I don't care. Okay, here we go. You know what, you know, we gotta come back, you know? And what happens is, I'm not balancing off of him, because if I balance off him, I'm giving him control of my balance. I'm feeling where he wants to go, and then I'm either changing the vector, or I'm pushing him in a way, forcing him to make an adjustment, and as I feel him adjust, I'm pushing him. So it teaches me also how to manipulate and take control of another person's balance long enough to throw their balance off so I can punch a hole in them and end it. So these are the kind of things I used to do. I mean, there were a lot of other things I did with Tim, but these are really, thank you, my friend, some of the more basic things that they did that allowed me to be able to develop my abilities. And of course, there are other things, you know, hacky sack, you know, puppeteering, all these different exercises. And what it really comes down to is Tim, in particular, modeling John understood. If you want to do the thing you want to be able to do, you have to practice doing that thing. And then you also have to practice those other elements that are related to that thing. So this is why he would use weighted objects. This is why he would do these exercises, because they build the foundation so that when you start developing the more fine motor coordination and the coordination to do other things, that you already have this baseline of strength or endurance or agility or whatever, so that as you're practicing it, you're building on top of that. You're not trying to start from scratch, reinventing from the wheel. So hopefully this gives you some ideas and some things you can do. There's a million things. Trust me, there are more things that I could talk about. You know, and in the book, whenever I get it done, on the system of warrior flow, one of the things myself and the other instructors are working on is making sure we capture all these different exercises into the book, and even things that other people have discovered that they do with their students, but based on the same principles of what I learned from my masters, so that other people can learn how to do these things, because not every exercise always works for everybody. It's like the weight room. You know, some people, they do flat bench, it seems to work for them. Some people, they never feel like they're getting the work, and then they find they get more out of using dumbbells. I mean, the principle is the same, so it becomes the matter of which works best for you, because the only thing that really counts is what is the end result? What is the thing you're trying to achieve? And I think that's an aspect of the martial arts in general that's been lost by a lot of people. They're worried too much about being cool and not worrying about what is the end result or end attribute or end skill that I want to be able to have, and what do I need to do in my own training to get there. Last point I'll make is, if you don't practice this stuff, if you don't put the energy into it, I'm sorry, you just won't get there. You have no idea how many people over the years I've trained, or students of mine who would come to me and ask me, you know, I'm trying to get better at this, you know, how do I get better? And I always ask them, well, did you practice the thing I showed you last week? And they're like, no. I'm like, oh, you know, I'm sorry, but it's like school. You know, if you don't study for your math test that you've known about for 2 weeks, you know, and you don't do your homework, you know, you got to get a 20 on the test. It's no secret why you got a 20. I don't care what you told your mom. I'm just telling you, it's no secret. This is no different. The level of effort, you know, focused effort, correct effort, I'm going to say, that you put into this, the level of ability on the output you're going to gain. So if you put the proper amount of effort into it, and of course allowing for recovery, and you're training and practicing right, guess what? You'll get the results. There's no magic to what I do. And this is the reason why when I work with people, one of the reasons why they get better is because I just make them do the things. I'm glad you punched me in the face there, by the way. That would have hurt, because I hurt. But I make them do the things in training that they need to do for their body, and I kind of test them every time I work with them to make sure they're kind of practicing the things that I want them to develop, because they're not going to get better if they're not practicing and putting some time in on their own.